On April 21, 1986, 30 million Americans tuned in to live television to watch Geraldo Rivera crack open a secret vault. The vault itself turned out to be completely empty, but the investigation leading up to that broadcast uncovered something genuinely strange: walled-off subterranean passages sitting beneath the Lexington Hotel, Al Capone's former headquarters, that were completely missing from the official building blueprints. Shortly after, the public was reminded of another architectural anomaly. Chicago possessed over 60 miles of abandoned freight tunnels, weaving directly underneath the city and attaching to almost every major downtown building. During the 1920s, Capone ran an illicit bootlegging empire that pulled in an estimated $60 million a year. Adjusted for inflation, that is roughly $1 billion in untaxed, highly illegal cash. Combine secret architectural anomalies, a sprawling 60-mile underground network, and an unimaginable scale of wealth, and a specific narrative naturally takes shape. The idea that gangsters operated a massive underground smuggling railway seems perfectly logical. The physical scale of Chicago's infrastructure and the historical weight of its criminal past created a narrative that remains deeply embedded in the city's identity. It is a story that demands forensic deconstruction to separate fact from lore. By 1833, Chicago was already a city of competing interests, with its first brewery and its first temperance movement opening in the same year. For the titans of industry, sobriety was a requirement. They sought a punctual workforce that could keep pace with the steam engine, while politicians realized that shutting down neighborhood bars would dismantle the very town halls where immigrant workers organized resistance. But the demand for alcohol never disappeared. When the government began physically smashing barrels and shutting down legal breweries, they created a highly lucrative vacuum. Criminal syndicates stepped in to supply what the law forbade. Meeting that massive demand required logistical space, and Chicago happened to be full of subterranean oddities entirely by accident. This cross-section illustrates how Chicago solved its early geography problem. In the 1850s, the city lifted its downtown streets between 4 and 14 feet to install sewers, leaving behind a patchwork of undocumented hollow voids. Decades later, an engineer named George W. Jackson exploited this chaotic geography. Using standard permits for narrow telephone conduits as a Trojan horse, Jackson's crews worked secretly through the night with muffled earth movers to carve a massive, unauthorized freight railway beneath those existing hollow spaces. By the time officials realized what was happening, Jackson had carved out 16 miles of track. They were forced to accept the finished project, and it eventually expanded into a legitimate 60-mile subterranean web integrated into the city's industrial skeleton. While the city's elites were busy enforcing morality on the surface, an entirely unmonitored labyrinth was expanding directly beneath their feet. It's easy to assume Capone used that freight system to move liquor. However, by Prohibition, that railway was a highly regulated commercial operation. It had paying clients, employee rosters, and 19 public elevator access points. It offered the exact opposite of the anonymous environment needed for smuggling. Capone didn't need a secret railway. He was paying the mayor and key police captains massive bribes to look the other way. His logistics relied on trucks, corrupt police escorts, and operating in broad daylight. When rival gangs competed for those open channels, the conflict spilled directly out of the shadows. It escalated into highly visible warfare, culminating in the St. Valentine's Day massacre, execution of 7 men right on the surface. The real bootlegging infrastructure was incredibly localized, claustrophobic, and brilliantly practical. Instead of trains, bootleggers used trap doors hidden behind speakeasy bars, like at the Green Mill. This allowed them to hoist untaxed alcohol directly from pre-existing basement cellars up to the patrons. They carved out musty, low-ceiling concrete spaces right beneath the floorboards of places like Timberlane's bowling alley, creating hidden coolers for contraband beer. Surviving establishments like the Green Door Tavern offer documented proof of this reality. The authentic underworld infrastructure consisted of small, individual basement modifications, not interconnected tunnel systems spanning the entire city. True organized crime logistics relied on gritty, minor architectural adjustments and a massive payroll of bribed officials, rather than grand subterranean engineering. Academic historians universally dismiss the idea of a bootlegging railway network. So why does the public refuse to let the myth die? The answer traces back to April 13, 1992, when a construction crew accidentally punctured a tunnel wall beneath the Chicago River. A high-pressure deluge of 250 million gallons of water violently burst right through the concrete. The ensuing flood caused nearly $2 billion in damage to downtown basements. The disaster dominated national news, abruptly introducing millions of modern Americans to the existence of a massive, forgotten 60-mile underground infrastructure. That sudden mass awareness landed in a culture already primed by mobster nostalgia. The public unconsciously fused the reality of Capone's localized trapdoors with the revelation of a sprawling industrial tunnel network. Ultimately, it created an irresistible cinematic supermyth. The actual historical footprint of Al Capone requires no subterranean master plans. He was an architect of corruption. He built a bureaucratic-like system of manipulation, protection rackets, and municipal denial. The Prohibition era didn't need a secret maze to function. The true legacy of that time is a heavily corrupted society that actively ignored the criminal empires operating right beneath its own floorboards.